Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tangled Silver's, the Ageless Lounge. And this week we have Dr. Sam Graber with us. And I'm really excited to share Dr. Sam with you because A, she's one of our newest ShePack writers. So welcome to the ShePack,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Sam, and to the community all together. And she is just an amazing woman with this holistic, I mean, gosh, like 30 plus years, right, of bringing the
Yeah.
holistic health to us and into different transitions in her life. And I just can't wait for you to hear what she has to share. But of course, I want to start this with the way we start every episode, which is what does it mean to you when I say I believe you are an ageless woman?
Ooh, well, I have given this some thought, Robin, because I love this question. It's one of those that really makes you think, right? It's not just spit out an answer. It's kind of like, what does make me feel that way? And if I were to share that term with someone else, and it really made me, what I kept landing on is I define myself by so many other things than my age that in essence, who I am is not tied to this number. I'm super proud. I love where I'm at. I'm 53. I love being 53. I think it's given me wonderful amount of freedom that maybe I didn't have access to before. And I know I'm still, in this baby stage, so to speak, for where I'm going to be 10, 20 years from now. So I love it. I think it's a great term, and I'm glad you asked. So it's really like defining myself outside of that number.
And I love that. I've had a few people that have been like, oh, I don't like that because using the word age just means we're trying to stay young. And I was like, no, it's not about staying young. It's about embracing wherever you are at in age,
Yes.
right? Like, whether you're young, whether you're older, it's about how you're living that life at that particular moment, right?
Yes.
And not holding on to the past, not spending too much time looking in the future because we all don't know what the future looks like or how long we get into the future, right? So I think it's about how you live today. And that's why the word ageless just really resonated with me when I was looking for what do we call this conversation chats I want to have with women that are transitioning their lives between, midlife and jobs and spouses and widows and grown kids, empty nesters, like all these things that we go through. And I just think it really does capture just ageless because we get to define who we are today.
Yes.
So
I love it too.
Share a little bit about your holistic background a little bit because you're a holistic health, which is one of the reasons why I was drawn to you at first. You come into this with so much perspective. Like I love that when I first found you on one of your website, I got these great tips about metabolism because at this point in the game, sometimes you're going, what is going on with my metabolism? So I just love that everything you do approaches things very holistically. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I would love to. So my background formally is in the science space, and then I was a chiropractor, a very holistic-minded chiropractor. I did the body work, but a lot of my work was based on nourishment and nutrition. And for the longest time, I worked with a lot of supplements, helping people eat better, but really focused on the supplements until all of a sudden it really dawned on me, like, wait a minute. Here I am, saying that a pill for everything that ails you from that medical model is not necessarily building health. But here I am just substituting a supplement. So I went even deeper into nourishment and what and when to eat. And I feel like that is the foundation of our life, what we eat, what our body assimilates. So that's why I really focus in on metabolism, because once we have that dialed in, I say it often that it helps you know what symptoms are truly yours and what were just a result of not quite being as nourished as you can be. Because so many things that we deal with throughout our lives, but especially in this transitional time of midlife, much of it has to do with insulin, cortisol, the changes in our sex hormones, our reproductive hormones. So it's like it all comes together kind of full circle. And if we just go and play whack-a-mole with this problem, like, oh, this problem, smack that, and then it's like, oh, another one pops up. Like the whole idea of holistic is to go upstream. And to me, metabolic health is upstream.
Yeah, well, I like that. I mean, I hadn't thought about that before with the whack-a-mole, but you're right. It's like you think
Always.
you get one thing solved and then something else pops up.
Yeah.
And you're right. We don't really take enough into consideration with the nutrition we're putting in our bodies, or the fact that those nutritional needs change
Absolutely.
at every different places of our lives, right? I mean, that's a big thing that I don't think we realize. We're like, oh, but I'm still working out and I'm still eating like I was that I've always eaten, but that might not be what your body now needs, or your, like you said, the lack of certain hormones
Mhm.
and DNAs and everything else that comes into play, right? That can really throw us off a little bit. And I think that women tend to be really tough on
Oh,
ourselves
so tough.
and don't understand that there's more going on than just beating ourselves up. I didn't exercise today. I ate ice cream today. Like we're so busy beating ourselves up
Mhm.
instead of realizing there's a bigger picture. Like,
Oh, yeah.
would you say?
Yeah, and that's social conditioning, and then we can go down that rabbit hole anytime. But yes, it's a lot of social conditioning, and we grew up in and many of the people listening or watching probably grew up in that time of no fat, low fat, right? And calorie restrictions, eat less, move more. We were really taught to exercise as punishment. And that is literally one of the worst things that we could have ever been taught because exercise and using this amazing body is a gift and it's such a way of mental health. It's such a way towards feeling connected, being grounded to the earth, being
Mhm.
connected to earth. Yet we were taught, you've got to just work your guts out and run like a maniac for, hours at a time. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing enough. And that's also kind of gets paralleled into the conditioning through societal work of, we are what we produce. You've got to work harder, the hustle. Ooh, that hustle. I'm an anti-hustle culture person. And I'm an anti-aging person too, because I think aging is a gift. I'm thankful for it. I hope I get to age to,
Yeah.
107. That's my goal. I think I shared that with you once. But, I need to keep my body and brain healthy so that I'm a happy, functional 107. I want it to be like, here's Sam, she's
Yes.
going along. Oh, she died 107. Like that's my goal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm doing those things and I help other people do that for themselves because you're the only one that can do it for you.
So when you say help other people, give me some,
Yeah.
obviously, like at the end of our conversation, we're going to let you know where you can reach her, but give me some samples of what are some of the things that you do to help in those areas. Like what is, somebody comes to you and goes, what's kind of a starting place to start, like a running, where do we get started on?
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to say running because there we go. Let's just throw in that whole scenario
Sure.
into the whole workout thing, right? That we just,
Right.
but again, like we automatically our brain goes to, oh gosh, this means I got to work out and I got to starve myself, right? Like
Yes. No,
that's
and
where
no.
our minds automatically go.
Right.
1,200 calories, or
Yes.
like, oh my gosh, and the idea of, I mean, have you tried to track 1,200 calories and how little food that is? And then
There's
you
no way
wonder
you
why
can
you feel
sustain.
so exhausted.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So share kind of how you approach it.
Mhm. Usually at first, like it depends what someone's coming to me for, and more often than not, they've been through this diet, quote unquote diet, this diet, they've restricted. It's all been about restriction. So oftentimes where we start is let's just see what you're currently doing. Kind of let me know what you're eating, when you're eating, why you're making these choices. What kind of premises are you working from? I do a lot of mindset work because that mindset has been, again, conditioned by society that we're doing whatever it is wrong. Simply because we're just, that's just really what we're taught. That if something's not going right in our life, it's our fault. So we lay that at our feet.
Right.
So I just try to see, okay, what's life like for you? What kind of demands do you have? What's your timing like? How much time do you have for yourself? Are you in that sandwich situation where you're caring for elders and you're caring for kids or grandkids? What is this life that you're leading like? And then we start looking at, I bring the Enneagram into my work. So that helps me know, is someone more a head type, more a heart type, emotion driven, or are they more that intuitive or action before they think kind of person? It helps me know how to best coach somebody. Because being at it this long, I've worked with just about every type of person in almost every scenario, lots of experience. And what is at the foundation is we are all unique. Yet we're all similar. We're unique in who we are and our mindset and our approach, but our bodies are pretty similar. So it's trying to figure out where someone is, and then depending how deep we're going to go, we might look at some of their lab work that they've had through their doctors. I always like to remind someone, I am a doctor, but I'm not your doctor. But I'm really great at helping people figure out what's going on behind the scenes, explaining some stuff that maybe
Well,
doctors haven't explained. Yeah.
and I like that. I was just having a conversation the other day with my daughter about the fact that sometimes, you don't get enough time. Maybe it was my daughter, maybe it was a friend of mine who just had some blood work done. It was a friend of mine. Sometimes we get in that doctor's office and we don't do the blood work until after we leave their office,
Yes,
right?
right.
And then if you're lucky, you get the quick call or the quick text report of what it is. But there's not really necessarily breaking down. If you're not a doctor, you're not medical wise, right? You don't necessarily know what all those things mean. And I can tell you myself, I'm going through and looking at my reports and doing Google searches, which you should never do. They're trying to figure out some of it, what it means.
Right.
It's like, ooh, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Like you start, like you can go down, like you said, the rabbit
Oh,
hole can be
yes.
really deep when it comes to this topic.
Mhm.
So I love the fact that you're telling people, I'm not your doctor, but you are somebody who can look at those things and come with that knowledge
Yeah.
and be able to maybe help them understand it on their level and give them the time
Yes.
and space to understand that, right? You're not going, okay, I got 5 minutes for you. What do you need? And I got to go next,
Yeah.
right? So
The whole
I think that's
system.
a great thing.
Right. The system is really set up to be disease management. There's nothing healthcare about it. And that's an unfortunate part because I know most doctors that I've ever talked to and known, these are wonderful people, very educated. But they're
Yeah,
conditioned in that silo of looking at the for the H's and L's, right? You look at H and L, if there's
yeah,
not a high or a low on your blood work, must be good. But those are narrow
right.
ranges, and some of those ranges don't really apply to maybe a woman in a certain stage of her reproductive health, or if there's insulin resistance, or if this person is just amped up on cortisol, or, insert issue here. So I look at patterns and I teach someone how to look at their patterns. I don't ever request just one set of lab work. I'm like, hey, if you can give me a couple years worth, game on. Let's look at this. Let's see what's going on. And nothing is more frustrating for a person that comes to me than when they say to me, look, here's my blood work. My doctor telling me everything looks quote unquote normal. Why do I feel so terrible? Why do I feel
Yes,
so not
yes,
normal? So that's where these patterns, it's like sometimes there's glucose patterns that one fasting glucose that one day, it's not picking up because maybe you changed your habits a couple days before because you're like, I'm going to have some lab work, so I'm going to really tighten up my way of eating. But then really,
right, right,
typically, you're
right.
not eating like that. So we people tell me everything, and I love it. There's never judgment in anywhere I'm at. Just tell me what we're working with. Let's figure it out. Let's see maybe why you're having cravings. Let's look at some of the behavior patterns because as
Mhm.
people in general, we have disordered eating, which just basically means like we don't really know how to eat intuitively or by nature because there's been so much junk in our food that has hijacked our brain and our chemicals, right? So it's almost like we go back to basics, and I love to treat it that way. Like, let's learn you. Let me help you learn you. I'll be here as a guide, but I like to lead them to lead themselves. It's really where I
Yeah.
think I shine, and it's a unique approach. Not everyone does it, and I wouldn't do it any other way.
But I was going to say, I think more of us need to take that approach because we have to be more proactive for ourselves
Yes,
and our health, right? Like
for sure.
you can go to the doctor's office, but you are still, and like I said, my doctors, I
Oh,
love my
yes.
doctor currently right now.
Wonderful
She's
people.
wonderful.
Mhm.
But again, in the realm of things, I am a number out of all the hundreds of patients that she sees in a year, right?
Yeah.
And nobody knows my body better than me. Nobody knows what my aches and pains
Mhm.
are. Nobody knows what my eating habits are
Right?
better than myself. So I have to start being proactive for myself to figure out what works and what doesn't work,
Yes.
right?
Before
And I think more
crisis.
of us need to take that.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think more of us need to come into owning that piece and knowing it's okay. It's okay to question your doctor,
Yeah,
right? You have a degree, but that it's okay for me to still question you, right? It's okay for me to
absolutely.
still say, well, why? Like, show me. Like again,
Yeah.
what is that? Show me. What is that, Jerry Maguire? Show me the money, right?
Yes. And then
Show
and
me
then that's
the
where I
help,
say
right?
to them, "Help me help you," to keep going with Jerry Maguire. Because yeah, it's
Right, right.
critical, and that's where and you nailed it with that self-responsibility. It's so empowering. Because if you can look and say, "Okay, this is the pattern, this is what I'm feeling, this is how I'm sleeping, this is how I'm stressing." And the games we play with ourselves like, "I'm not that stressed." But you look at your body, you look at your glucose spiking. Sometimes I might recommend somebody speak with their doctor about a continuous glucose monitor as a way to kind of see what your body does in response to food, sleep, stress, exercise. I mean, it's fascinating the data
Mhm.
we can get. And I'm kind of a data girl. Like I love to see the objective numbers and make decisions that way.
So I'll tell you, my husband is diabetic too.
Okay.
Um, and so every once in a while, not very often, but every once in a while, it'll be this like, let's prick your finger and see
Yes.
what your numbers are at today. And I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
And then he always gets really mad because my numbers are usually really low. Like, and I can have just eaten a ton of sugar, and yet my insulin number is really low. And he's like, that's just not okay. I don't do any of that, and I've got these really high
Mm.
numbers. But again, that just goes to show the difference in, like, for him having diabetes, he didn't understand it because it's not hereditary for him.
Okay.
Like, he doesn't have anybody in his family. He's the first one in his family who has it.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, my father's had diabetes right up until he passed, and it was really. I mean, my father did not eat the way he was supposed to. He still lived to be 76,
Okay. Hmm.
77.
Yeah.
Um, but like he had to have some toes amputated because he was not. He knew that you had to do things differently, but he refused to go out with the things that he wanted to have.
Yeah.
So for me, like, there would be more of that chance in both my husband's and my mind that I would be potentially able to hit it, because it didn't get my father till he was in his 50s. Although he was in his early 50s, I am now 57.
Hmm.
um, but you still look at this thing. So like, I do find it's fun because we check everyone, not regularly because I don't have diabetes, so I don't feel the need to have to prick my finger on a regular basis. But it is interesting to check it and see that, like, yes, for me, it has stayed steady over the last 10 years. It really hasn't gone one way or another. It's just kind of been like this,
Yeah.
which is interesting in an insulin spot. But then again, like, the weight has also just stayed like this, right? Unless I do something extreme, like cut the calories, right? And then I can lose about 10 pounds. But the minute I stop being
Oh,
extreme,
yeah. Right.
right. So I think it's this cycle that we have to really figure out what works for us. And so
It is. And
having
it's
somebody that's
it's
kind of there
interesting
on the
with the
team, right?
right. Yeah, and it's interesting with the glucose because glucose is a lagging indicator, meaning it shows up when, whoa, we are already in a problem. If glucose, the baseline number stays higher. But over time, the lead indicator is insulin. But we don't typically test for our fasting insulin. So that's something that I recommend to everybody to get from their doctor. And it's not expensive. It doesn't have to be some big ordeal, but to know where your resting insulin is, your fasting insulin, is a huge data point that means a lot. Especially as we look in and we look at triglycerides, we look at cholesterol panel. We ideally, maybe in time, can look at some cortisol. But most people, their cortisol is out of whack. We're on these patterns that aren't quite working in our favor. And a lot of this is just lifestyle situational. And that's where I'm an expert in lifestyle and looking at how someone lives, what they do, when they eat, how they rest, how they exert themselves, what their entire life is like. That has so much power and is really what turns on and off the genes that cause some of these issues. You've
Mhm.
probably heard a term most people have heard of, maybe called epigenetics, which is what's happening to the genome. And it's a fascinating area of science, but all the levers are all turned on and off. A majority of them are turned on and off through lifestyle and exposure. So we try to keep chemical exposure down. Things that we put on our body and in our body really matter.
Mhm.
And we don't need to do a lot of these really fancy detoxes and extreme things. It's the stuff we do on the day-to-day and don't do on the day-to-day that really make the difference.
So how do you feel about, um, like, there's all these different thoughts process, but what I've heard a lot is in far as like the women in menopausal stages,
Sure.
right? Perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, is in this whole thing of now fasting, fasting for so many hours per
Mhm.
day. What's your thought on fasting?
Huge
Because like
proponent. Yeah.
I've tried it before and
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. You've tried, you kind of
So
dabbled.
I've
Yeah.
tried. Yeah. Well, I've tried it one more time and it really worked well, and then it seemed like my body kind of was like, okay, great, you're there. So now I'm like, for me, it's like everything I do. I use the same shampoo that I love, and after about 6 months, I gotta shake up my head for about 2 months of using something different because my body goes, no, I don't like that
That's
anymore.
the
Like I like it, but
body.
just give me a break. So yeah.
Right.
So, but what's your thought on that? Because there's a lot of talk about fasting right now around women in menopause, especially, and what that looks like. And is it like a set, or is it again more characteristic of us as individuals, how many hours we should or shouldn't be
Yeah,
fasting?
that is one area that I focus a lot on with my clients. For some, they're able, like we start out with time restricted eating, which technically fasting I look at as 24 hours or longer. Time restricted eating is
Okay.
more where you're at that, you hear the terms like 16/8. So you
Right.
compress all the food and calories that you're going to take in and nourishment into an 8-hour window. And then for 16 hours, you
Hmm.
fast where you just have water or maybe tea that is not flavored or sweetened or anything like that, and maybe coffee, black coffee. But for many women, especially through their menopause and perimenopause time, if they have a really high cortisol and a lot of stressors going on in their body, I don't recommend any fasting longer than maybe some time restricted eating, depending. And when we look at the foods, I want to look at foods that don't spike their insulin, because insulin and cortisol, they get into like a little death match. So if your insulin's real high and your cortisol is really high, a lot of the energy that you have available for healing, for thinking, for sleeping, for all those important behind the scenes things, that energy is depleted because of the insulin and cortisol really wrangling with each other. And that's just the hormone hierarchy. So if someone's already under a lot of that pressure from the biochemistry, I don't recommend longer fasts. But my primary work is to get
So give
insulin
me give
shot. Yeah, is to get insulin under control so that it's adaptive. Yeah.
so give me an idea, just because when you
Yeah.
said the foods that can cause that,
Yes.
what kind of foods are you talking about that cause the two of them to come into this death
Yes.
match, so to speak? What
Yes.
kind of foods does that look like?
Yeah. Well,
Because I mean, I'm thinking about what do
cortisol.
I eat? I'm thinking,
Right. Cortisol is our stress hormone. That's our chronic stress hormone.
right,
So she's on scene
right,
if we're dealing with things that are spiking glucose, which then spikes our insulin. So foods like that, or any of your carbohydrates, predominantly the
mm,
factory made ones, not so much the nature made ones. Some
okay,
fruits,
okay,
maybe. So I look at fats and protein. In my world and my clients, I teach them to really prioritize protein first. That's what we build our meal around. And then we add healing fats, which are different than, I do not recommend seed oils, canola oil, anything like that. Those are highly inflammatory or pro inflammatory. We want to look at foods that are as close to nature as possible, ghee, butter, from ideally happy cows that have been raised regeneratively or on organic
right.
farms, or able to be a cow and live the cow life. And then we look at things like good olive oil, knowing our
I love
farmers,
olive oil.
right? Like, I know, just bathe me in it. No, we want to know where the resources are, where the source of the food is coming from. And then our meat,
Mhm.
looking at meat that is raised as close to the way nature intended as possible, from non-polluted lands. I have what I call the protein hierarchy that I share with my clients of, this, if you can, where you can budget for it, focus on good fats and good protein. And then you add in
Okay,
vegetables that are grown above ground, ideally aren't sprayed. If they're from your own backyard, that's great, or a farmer's market,
right.
and we don't have to get truly like super obsessed with it. But the idea is to just start making those changes that are slight improvements. Every time we shop, slight
Mm.
improvements.
Well, I like the fact that you're talking about the nut oils, because
Yeah.
everybody for a while there was really pushing the nut oils, and I've always been. My family. I was okay. So doing DNA testing, those
Yeah.
23andMe and those kinds of stuff, I've discovered that I wasn't as Italian. I mean, I'm still like half Italian,
Sure.
right, from my father's side. But there's also a lot of other, like, we were laughing because my father, you're Italian, you're Italian, you're
Yeah.
Italian, and that's pretty much showing up. Going, my maiden name is Palmatessa. I'm Italian. But then it turned out I've also got a lot of
Sure.
English and Irish in me as well. But like,
Yeah.
but I laugh because like, but because of that, it's like olive oil is a staple for me. Olive oil is a
Yes.
skincare for me. It's something I love having my bread, dipping it in my fresh
Hmm.
extra virgin olive oil,
Yeah.
right? That is like the best thing with raw garlic rubbed all over it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes, I love those. So when you say that about the nut seed, I think it's so great because when people go, "Oh yeah, I got sesame seed nut oil," or "I've got that," I'm
Mhm.
like, "Ew," like, ah.
Yes.
But there are a lot of people that still look at those and think, well, it's better than the vegetable oil, right? Like they think the
Well,
seed
right.
oil
Yeah,
is
because there's no
better than
vegetables
vegetable oil,
in
but
it.
I've learned really they're,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
just knowing those things. And so, in my work, when I work with the client, we just learn the basics, like learn these foundational things, start building out your meals so that they're truly nourishing. And place
mhm,
where I often diverge from popular culture is I'm not a person that says everything in moderation because some food is not food. I'm going to start spelling it PHOOD because it's not food. It's like a fake food, and there's no nourishment in that. So when we get back to
right,
truly nourished, and we don't have to be 100% strict all the time, but sometimes at first, because the body is ailing and the body is just in need of nourishment, we need to be really kind of tight with the parameters momentarily so we can get the body like revived back to behaving like a normal, healthy, beautifully designed body is supposed to be able to behave. So we can then, build in some leverage here and there with what we eat. But a lot of the work I do is that mindset of food isn't necessarily supposed to be entertainment. And we
right.
cope with food, but maybe we need to work on other coping mechanisms instead of going to food for celebration, for when we're feeling down, for entertainment. There's a lot of stuff to unpack, and so I work on it all: body, mind, spirit, gut. I mean, we approach everything. I'm not a dilly dally, tiptoe in. I'm like bull in a china shop. Let's get this work done. Let's figure this out. And they come out the other side.
But I,
They come out whole. That's the idea, to be holistic. Hmm.
yeah, and I love that. I absolutely love that. So we could go on and
Oh,
on
we
and
could.
on, and we try to keep our conversations a little bit short. So what I want to do is have you tell everybody if you've said something, rather it's everything you've said, rather it's a certain
Yeah.
sentence you said, and you want to learn more or hear more or reach out to Dr. Sam. Dr. Sam, tell us how they can reach you. Where can they contact you? How can they follow you
Yeah,
socially?
I love it.
Give us
Um,
all your goods.
Excellent. Thank you. So the best way for anyone to get in touch is to just go to my website, which will be in the show notes, but it's drsamgraber.com, spelled out as you see on the screen here, minus the period. And go to my contact form and just fill out like, hey, I saw you with Robin, and I just want to know a little bit more, or I want to get plugged in. I do a weekly email, and then I also have a top 10 tips for boosting your metabolism, which none of it is eat less, move more. It's all about, protein, fats, looking at the times that you're eating, all the good stuff. And if you like to be on social media, I'm not really on like the Facebook and the TikTok and everything, but I'm more on LinkedIn. I do a weekly newsletter there as well, and you can find me and follow me on LinkedIn at Dr. Sam Graber as well. And I would love to hear from anyone. Bring on any questions. Nothing's off the table
Great.
ever.
That's awesome. And you also get to now see her in our magazines
Yes.
right now, right? Like she is joining us. And so we have these great arcs. We have February is going to drop. Well, by the time you all are seeing this, the February will have just dropped
Excellent.
past Friday because this will be going live on I think the 13th of February. So, but it's out. So make sure you take a look at that February issue to see what Dr. Sam shares about in February.
Excellent.
And thank you, Dr. Sam, for being a part of our community, sharing your time today, giving us some wisdom, because I really feel like nutrition and health are all part of the way of living agelessly,
Yes.
not just focusing on the outer appearances, but on what goes inside in our mental state of health and all that good stuff. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and your 30 plus years of holistic wisdom on that. So thank you, everybody. We will see you next week.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.